Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Mad Capper, and this is another video on Raid Shadow Legends and another in a series of I built them so you don't have to. Today I'm going to be going over Umetogi. She is a Shadowkin single target nuking champion with a kind of a neat kit. So without further ado, let's take a look at Umetogi. Fade into nothing. Places a perfect veil buff and a 30% increased speed buff on this champion for 2 turns, then fills this champion's turn meter by 40%. Silent Parting. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit will ignore 20% of the target's defense. Has an additional 20% chance of inflicting a critical hit if this champion is under a veil or perfect veil buff. Standoff. Passive. Whenever this champion is attacked, completely blocks 1 hit, decreasing incoming damage to 0, then counterattacks with the default skill. When attacked by a boss, decreases the incoming damage by 50% instead before counterattack. Psy Assassin. Attacks one enemy 2 times, has an additional 20% chance to crit if this champion is under a veil or perfect veil buff. All right, there you go. That's her kit. Now let's take her in. I'll show you what artifacts we use, what her statistics are, what her stats are, and of course her masteries. Then we'll talk a little bit about her kit and how we're going to do testing, because we're going to do a little bit different in this one than I normally do, just because of how her kit goes. So we'll talk about that right next. All right, so here's our Umetogi. First off, ironically, so I was in Ivy's chat earlier on Twitch, and she was saying Armiger, and it's Armiger, so Armiger. So I was like, hey, by the way, duh. And then I mentioned that, you know, oh yeah, and Layla always says Umeko, and that kind of that always gets me. It not irks me, but just gets me. So I was like, that's not how you say her name. And I was saying her name wrong too. I was saying Yumiko, which would be with an I, but Yumko is actually how she should be said. Anyway, I do that, and then I follow that up with a champion. I don't know how to say her name. I don't know how to properly say her name. If you can tell me how to properly say her name, I know there's going to be 7 different ways of saying it in the comments down below, and none of them will be right. But if you are a native of Japan or fluent in the Japanese language, please let me know. Umetogi? I feel like it should be Umetogi. Because if it was Umetogi, it'd be a Y. Because that's the... So I'm going to say it's Umetogi. Or Umtogi. Ume, right? Umetogi? Umami? Umetogi? I don't know. Let me know. Comments down below. Umetogi. We're going to say Umetogi. And I probably say Umetogi a lot during the video. I apologize. I can't decide. You tell me. Anyway, her kit, this is how we have her built out. Total stats, 6805 attack, 171 speed, 284 crit damage. That lowered crit rate allows us to get for the extra stats. And actually wasn't a very hard build in the grand scheme of things. I know you're saying, oh, but yeah, sure. But honestly, I don't think I stole gear from anyone for this build. I just happen to have this little ditty sitting there on and every time I do a video on someone from Shadowkin, I just use that for the nuking. But as far as the masteries go, very standard masteries. I had tested her out a little bit in the arena, so this is how I have her. TLDR, I'm not even going to put it into the video. Not really worth it. I'll talk about that in the final comments, why I did not show the arena and why I don't think, while it feels like she should be arena able, she just truly isn't quite. We'll talk about that in a second. That said, this is how we have her built. This is pretty standard build for me. I'd probably put her in War Master if you're going to use her in faction wars or dungeons, that sort of thing, just for that extra damage. That's probably going to be more useful for you than the 50-50 chance of Helm Smasher. And then defense, everyone has their own kind of theory as to which way to go. Main thing is just get to that retribution. And let's talk about her kit, because we're gonna do her damage testing a little bit differently. I'm gonna bring her in dragon. We're gonna do 3 dragon runs of dragon level 24. We're going to have 3 different lead champions. The first one's going to be Whisper. Bit of an unfair advantage. Whisper does have an aura, and on top of it is an absolute beast when it comes to bosses in the dungeons. But it gives us a baseline, because that is who I think has the most consistently top tier damage among epics that aren't using enemy max HP. So it's a good baseline. Then we're gonna bring Umetogi in. I don't even know how to say her name. And then we're gonna actually bring in Shani, who is also a Shadowkin epic, also magic affinity, and kind of fits a lot of the same space. They do have slightly different kits, but the question is Shani's kit better plus her damage is better, or is Umetogi going to be able to do more damage than Shani to justify using her in certain situations versus the other? Very specifically, I use Shani all the time. I really like her as a champion. I use her in Faction Wars, and so it's a good comparison for me to be able to decide what I feel about Umetogi. So, so next I'm going to show you the 3 dragon runs to show you what the comparisons were, and then we'll jump finally into our final thoughts. Alright, everybody, we're gonna do a very special, different kind of test here, because I feel like in order to truly maximize Umetogi's kit, you need to give her the best chance of success, which means getting those extra hits and all the rest. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna run this one right now. And we're going to record, capture Whisper's damage, and then we're going to compare her damage to the damage that Umetogi does, and we'll see how close they are to each other. Then I'm going to do a third one, and we're actually going to bring in Shani, which I think makes it a good fair comparison. It's a good 3-way comparison to see how their kits react in a full run and what kind of damage they're putting together all around. I also want to make a note that I didn't have the opportunity. It's 4 days till Shadowkin opens. I don't want to have to save this video for then, and I couldn't skip this video for another video to get it in there. But that's kind of where I see Umetogi as a strong opportunity to be used. It's something that that's really what I want to compare it to Shani, because I use Shani right now and I get those are my best times. And so if I can find a good replacement, if she is doing more damage over a run, then that might just make sense. So 1 minute run, this is my team that I use. I usually use it on 25, but obviously it can be used 24 or 25. And you see Whisper at 1.270 damage. So let's keep that. Now let's edit the team. And we're going to go back in. There's a definite disadvantage here for Umetogi. Because I have Whisper as lead, that's the extra attack damage, but that's part of the kit. So what I should be doing, and I'm not going to do because that's way too much of a waste of my resources just to try to level that playing field. What I should be doing is making a team using her crit rate, so lowering everyone else's crit rate by 15%, blah blah. But it's just too much. So just keep in mind when you get the damages that potentially we could make the damages higher here, just because we're using Umetogi in the lead, which would mean more crit damage overall. So let's see what happens here. It's unfortunate that that we're not doing this. I guess I could have built her damage lower, or her crit rate lower, sorry, and pushed her crit damage even higher. But, you know, as they say, it is what it is. Now, keep in mind, I was doing some testing earlier, and I can't confirm it, but I did see her actually not get a crit hit while under Veil, which should be virtually impossible, especially against Spirit Affinity, because she's already getting a natural boost. So let's see if that happens again. Maybe that was just some weird anomaly. Maybe. Who knows? Oh, plus she's gonna get the crit rate, so we're fine now. We're never gonna get it. So there's that save. The save is she's getting that reduced damage against her from her passive. That's something that you can't really quantify. She lives all the time because she's only going to take 50% chance damage against a boss, whereas anyone else will take full damage. So there are cases where perhaps one of the other champions would die that she's living. So you can see 1.2 versus 700,000, just not really at the same level, which is to be expected, right? But the real opportunity, so you see here Umetogi, not really a dungeon need. She does good damage. I mean, it's a little unfair. She actually does really good damage, just not to the level of damage that Whisper can do with her special boss level extra damage modifier. Now we're going to do one final one. Oops, we're going to have to go into here. We're going to do one final test, and that's going to bring in Shani. We're going to see whether or not her or Shani is the better one, and that's really going to determine whether I think this champion is worth building. I think the potential is there if you have her and you don't have the other, but if you have both her and Shani, then the question is, which is the better one to use? And that's what we're going to find out as soon as I find Shani. There she is. All right. Now, keep in mind, Shani actually has the lowest attack of all the champions we're testing here. So that will come into play as well. And of course, this is all about damage testing on the boss, obviously. It just gives you a good versus test, right? If it's good, if it can hit numbers on boss, it can hit numbers on the other thing. There's no enemy max HP issue. So there's an HP burn, so keep that in mind. That's a big deal that Shani has over Umetogi. Not so big for waves, big deal on bosses because you're going to be doing some good percentage damage there. And increasing duration, another big deal that you can't really quantify through damages, that you have to keep in mind when doing that. That's 119,000, almost 120,000 she does from HP burn. So that's a big number. The flip side is she could die, right? Because she's not. Yeah, like look how close she is to. So if you're not living, Umetogi has the better job there. So they're almost identical. So Shani actually a little bit less damage, keeping in mind that she's extending debuffs, which is a big deal. She's also way less built. If I put Shani in end game level gear to have Umetogi, I think she would just do better. So it looks to me, based on this, that I can't really recommend her. I do like her. I think she's an option if you need a 5th damage dealer. Let's go to final thoughts and we'll wrap it up and we'll kind of talk about what I think of her there. My final thoughts on Umetogi. I had high hopes. And I'm actually a little bit disappointed. Given the gear she has, given the amount of attack and crit damage she has, she really underperformed in the dragon tests. I'll also tell you, I did spend a lot of time trying to test her in a go second scenario for the arena. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying you're probably going to have better champions. The reason why she might be good in arena for you, and I'll get this out of the way, is because of the way this ability works. She can decrease damage to 0, counterattack with the default skill. So that's just going to help the amount of damage you're doing in the arena, go second team, that sort of thing. Whether or not it works in practice is a different story. And of course, when you're trying to test a go second team, you're up against other teams' defenses. So it's really not the same test. You can't really one-to-one be able to test whether or not she's going to work in that scenario. Also, I believe that I don't have the right champions to be able to test her. She needs Necrit. She needs something, because typically there's two incoming damages. The debuff, say a Lydia, it does damage. So that's where this is going to proc. It's going to hit. And then the secondary damage is going to be from their nuker, which then she will die because she's a nuker. So it doesn't make for a very good go second scenario. But if you have like a Necrit to protect, or maybe an Ursaga, or maybe you're really fast on the front end so that you can actually set up all the defensive hits, maybe get her to do 1 damage, and then you're bracing for their turn. Stuff like that maybe work, but it was so difficult to try to kind of make that happen in such a way that I could show you. So while I think conceptually there is a very, 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 very niche spot for her in the arena, I think functionally the reality is there's too many champions in this game that they would just be better. But nonetheless, I want to give her fair shake on that. As for the rest of it, very disappointing, very underwhelming damage. The ability, now I didn't use her aura as well, but I suspect that if you can't, she was at 6,800, 280 damage. If she's not going to do damage there, being able to eke out another 15% crit damage or 200 attack and dropping her crit rate down by 15 more for her aura is not going to be the difference maker between her doing next level damage and just being below average. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at my Chani build, Chani is actually built far inferior to Umetogi. Still can't get her name right. And yet was doing comparable damage, just slightly less damage, and has the ability to extend debuffs. It just makes no sense to me that this champion hits poorly. But when you look at her kit, there's a very glaring problem with her kit, and that is where I will go next. In order to make her a viable champion, in my opinion, she needs 1 change and 1 change only. It's a problem with Candrafon, and it's a advantage of Whisper, and that is her skill that buffs her core, in other words, buffs her crit rate, is the perfect veil. The problem is this burns a turn. So after this, she's done. And then she has to sit and wait and hope and pray. Which means you either need a Duchess to activate, or one of the other champions to be able to activate, Rector, for example, to activate the skill without her, in which case, what's the point of the skill? Or you need to use this skill and then just hold your breath until she gets to take a turn. But more importantly than that, because other champions are doing damage on that turn, it makes them infinitely better. You see it with Whisper. Not only is Whisper increasing her crit rate and attack, then she's hitting and doing significant damage. That is, you just can't make that up. Now, I understand why they functionally did that, because they say, oh, well, you've got damage here. But it's not enough. And for me, in order to make her a good champion, this needs to be a damage skill. It needs to place a perfect veil and an increased speed buff on the champion for 2 turns, then attacks 1 enemy, ignoring 50% damage. And that number should be hard hitting. It should be, let's say 200k, let's say 150k, let's say 75% of the damage that Whisper did on her A2, which is her skill that hits the hardest. It's the one that doesn't give the extra turn. I think that is how I envision this to properly work. She needs it, because right now I can't think of all but a very select scenarios where I would use her over Chani in this role, because Chani brings me increased debuffs. She does the same level of damage. She has an AoE ability. All Umetogi has is a perfect veil to hide herself and speed up herself and increase the turn meter herself, and nothing more. And so the hope is that if she ever gets a buff, if they ever look at her, and she's a new champion, so this may never happen, but putting damage on the skill, now it's okay. Do I need a champion that's doing good damage and some mitigation, or do I need a champion that's increasing buffs and doing that thing? Then it's an if or. Then they're both good champions under different conditions. But as it stands right now, I've got to be honest, I can see people wanting to use her because the Shadowkin, if this is the epic you got, it's not like she does bad damage. But I really think that if you get this champion, your best bet is to slide her into your vault and pick a different champion. unless you absolutely need her to get through Shadowkin. And unfortunately, it's just one change to make all the difference in the world for me, but it's a change that needs to happen before I can recommend her for build. So that is it. That is it for this video. Please let me know in the comments down below. Agree, disagree. How do I say her name? Leave it down in the comments down below. Also, like, subscribe, share with a friend, notifications on. Ring that bell, as they say. Please do that for me so that I can get myself back into the vaunted YouTube algorithm that I have been shunned from due to my own fault. And of course, as always, please be safe, be kind, and we'll see you in the next video.